I drive a lot for work. At the time this happened, I was covering several states for a company that serviced industrial equipment. Most weeks I spent more time in my truck than I did at home. Long drives became routine. Coffee, podcasts, gas stations, and rest stops all blended together after a while. That's probably why I noticed the SUV. Most people wouldn't have. I wish I hadn't. It started during a trip through northern Ohio. I had been driving for nearly 4 hours when I pulled into a highway rest area about 11 at night. It wasn't one of the newer ones with restaurants and bright lights. This place was old. A few vending machines, a restroom building, several picnic tables, and that's about it. The parking lot was mostly empty. There were maybe 3 cars scattered around the lot and one dark colored SUV parked beneath a streetlight near the far edge. I didn't think anything of it. I parked, used the restroom, grabbed a bottle of water from the vending machine, and got back on the road. Total time there was maybe 10 minutes. The SUV never moved. 3 nights later, I was traveling through the same area on my way back. Around the same time, same rest stop, same parking lot, and the same SUV. At first, I assumed it was coincidence. The vehicle wasn't especially unique. Dark blue, older model, nothing remarkable about it. But as I pulled into the lot, I noticed something strange. It was parked in exactly the same space. Not close. It was parked in exactly the same space. Not close. Exactly. The same angle and the same position under the light. I remember staring at it through my windshield. Something felt off. Not dangerous, just unusual. I sat there for a moment before convincing myself I was overthinking things. Then I went inside. When I came back out, I glanced toward the SUV again. Still there. No lights, no movement, no sign of anyone inside. The following week, I made the same trip again, and that's when things got weird. The SUV was there. Again, same spot, same position, same everything. Now my curiosity was fully awake. Nobody leaves a vehicle at a rest stop for weeks, at least not without attracting attention. I walked a little closer as I headed towards the restroom. Not close enough to look suspicious, just close enough to get a better look. The windows were dark. I couldn't see inside. But what caught my attention was the layer of dirt covering the vehicle. It looked like it hadn't moved in a very long time. That night, I mentioned it to one of the workers cleaning the building. The guy was probably in his 60s. When I described the SUV, he immediately knew which one I meant. That surprised me. You mean the one by the light? I nodded. Yeah. He shrugged. It's been there a while. A while? He thought for a second. Couple months, maybe. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. I asked why nobody had it towed. He just shook his head. State police checked it. That answer created more questions than it solved. Checked it for what? Why? What happened? But before I could ask anything else, he walked away. For the next few weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because I was scared, because it didn't make sense. The vehicle became part of my routine. Every trip, I looked for it. Every trip, it was there. Then one night I noticed something new. The light inside the SUV, very faint, barely visible, like a glow from a cell phone screen. I actually stopped walking. The parking lot was empty. No vehicles nearby. No people nearby. Yet there was definitely a soft light coming from somewhere inside. I stood there for several seconds watching. Then it disappeared. Just like that. Gone. My first thought was somebody was inside after all. Maybe living there. Maybe sleeping there. Maybe hiding there. Whatever explanation I came up with felt better than the alternative. I finished my break and left. But the image stayed with me the entire drive home. A month later, I pulled into the rest stop again. This time, the SUV was gone. The space was empty. For some reason, that bothered me more than seeing it there. After months of always finding it in the same place, the empty parking spot felt wrong. Like something familiar had disappeared. I asked the cleaning guy about it. The same older man was working that night. When I mentioned the SUV, he became unusually quiet. Finally, he said, "They took it." Who? State police. That's all he offered. I assumed that was the end of the story. A vehicle abandoned for months had finally been removed. Nothing mysterious about that. Then about 6 months later, I stopped at the diner near the same highway. While eating breakfast, I overheard 2 local men discussing the rest stop. One of them mentioned the SUV. The moment I heard that, I started listening. Apparently, the vehicle belonged to a man who had been reported missing nearly a year earlier. His family believed he had vanished while traveling through the area. Authorities eventually located the SUV at a rest stop. The strange part wasn't finding the vehicle. It was what they didn't find. No sign of the owner. No evidence of where he'd gone. No indication he'd ever left the property. Just an abandoned SUV beneath a light. For months. The state police searched nearby woods, checked surveillance footage, interviewed travelers. Nothing. The case remained unsolved. Years later, I still think about that rest stop. I still drive that highway occasionally. And every time I pass through, I glance toward the far corner of the parking lot. The spot beneath the street light is empty now. It had been for a long time. But every once in a while, I catch myself expecting to see that SUV sitting there, waiting, exactly where it always was. And I can't shake the feeling that if I ever did see it again, I'd keep driving and never stop. I wasn't supposed to stop. That was the whole reason I was running late in the first place. The weather forecast had called for light rain, but somewhere in western Pennsylvania it turned into one of the worst storms I'd driven through in years. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Water pooled on the highway. Every passing semi felt like a wave crashing over my windshield. By the time I saw the sign for the rest area, I was exhausted. I figured I'd stop for 10 minutes, let the rain ease up, and get back on the road. That decision still bothers me. The rest stop sat between two heavy wooded stretches of highway. It wasn't very large. A parking lot, a restroom building, a few vending machines, several covered picnic tables, and one of those giant visitor information displays mounted near the entrance. This place was almost empty. A pickup truck sat near the far end of the lot. A sedan was parked closer to the building. And that was it. Rain hammered the roof as I stepped inside. The building was warm, quiet, and mostly deserted. I used the restroom, I stretched my legs, and wandered toward the visitor information area near the entrance. I wasn't looking for directions, I was just killing time. The display contained a huge map of the surrounding region, nearby towns, state parks, highways, tourist attractions. The sort of thing nobody actually needs anymore because everyone has GPS. Still, I found myself staring at it while listening to the rain outside. That's when I noticed her. Not directly, in the reflection. The map was covered by a sheet of glass. As I looked at it, I could see the room reflected behind me, and standing several feet back was a woman. She wasn't doing anything strange, just standing there, watching. I assumed she'd walk in without me noticing. No big deal. I turned around. Nobody was there. The room was empty. I remember blinking several times, then looking around. Nothing. No woman, no footsteps, no opening door, nothing. At first, I laughed at myself. I was tired. It had been a long drive. Maybe I had mistaken a reflection for something else, a shadow, a coat rack, anything. I shook it off and headed back towards my car. But before leaving, I took a quick photo of the storm. The rain was coming down hard, and I thought the scene looked interesting. The parking lot lights reflected off the wet pavement, while dark clouds hung over the trees. Nothing special, just a random picture to send to a friend later. And I got back on the highway. The entire incident faded from my mind, at least until later that night. I checked into a hotel around 2 a.m. After unloading my bags, I sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through photos from the trip. Eventually, I reached the picture from the rest stop. That's when I froze. Standing beside the visitor map was a woman. My stomach dropped immediately. I zoomed in, then zoomed in further. There she was. Dark hair, dark jacket, pale face, looking directly at the camera. The strange thing wasn't that she appeared in the photograph. People accidentally show up in pictures all the time. The strange thing is where she was standing. Because the photo had been taken after I turned around, after I looked through the room, after I confirmed nobody was there. Yet somehow she appeared in the image anyway. I spent nearly an hour trying to explain it. Maybe she'd entered the room while I was leaving. Maybe she'd been hidden behind something. Maybe I simply missed her. Every explanation sounded reasonable, until I zoomed in closer. The woman wasn't standing beside the map. She was standing behind it, inside the reflection. I stared at the image for several minutes. The more I looked at it, the less sense it made. Everything else in the photo appeared normal. The room, the map, the lighting, the reflections, all normal, except for her. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I convinced myself I was being ridiculous. There had to be a simple explanation. There always is. By lunchtime, I had almost talked myself out of worrying about it. Then my phone rang. The caller ID showed my friend Ryan, the same friend I sent the photo to. The moment I answered, he asked, "Who was that woman?" I immediately felt uneasy. "What woman?" "The one in the picture." I didn't answer. Then he said something I still remember perfectly. "I thought you said the rest stop was empty." My stomach tightened, because that's exactly what I told him. For the next several days, I couldn't stop looking at the image. The woman appeared ordinary enough. Nothing obviously frightening about her. Yet every time I saw her face, something felt wrong. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. A month later, I found myself driving through the same area. And against my better judgment, I stopped. The rest stop looked exactly the same. The map still stood near the entrance. The parking lot looked unchanged. Everything felt normal. Almost. I walked over to the map, pulled out my phone, and compared the image to the actual display. That's when I noticed something. The map had been replaced. Not updated, replaced entirely. Different design, different layout, different information. Yet the photograph on my phone showed an older version. I asked one of the maintenance workers about it. He told me the display had been changed nearly 2 years earlier. 2 years? I showed him the photograph. His expression immediately changed. He stared at it for several seconds. Then he asked, "Where did you get this?" I explained. The man looked uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Finally, he said, "That's the old map." I nodded. "I know." Then he pointed towards the woman. I mean her. My heart immediately started racing. Before I could ask another question, he shook his head. "You should probably go." And that was it. No explanation, no details, nothing. I left shortly afterward. To this day, I still have the photograph saved on an old hard drive. I don't look at it often. Honestly, I wish I had deleted it years ago. But because every now and then curiosity gets the better of me, when I zoom in on the reflection, I notice something I somehow missed before. The woman isn't looking at the camera. She's looking at me, standing exactly where I was when I took the picture, as if she'd been watching the entire time, waiting for me to notice her. I've always preferred driving at night. Less traffic, less noise, less stress. For years, I worked as a regional sales representative, which meant spending most of my week out on the road. Long drives became part of life. I knew which gas stations stayed open the latest, which highways had the least traffic, and which rest stops were worth stopping at. That's when the rest area outside of Indianapolis caught my attention, because after hundreds of visits, I'd never seen it that full. It was a Friday night in late October, cold, windy, the kind of night where you could feel winter getting closer. I had been driving for nearly 7 hours and planned to stop for a few hours of sleep before finishing the trip in the morning. As I pulled into the rest area, I immediately realized finding a parking space was going to be difficult. The lot was packed. Cars, SUVs, several campers, a handful of semi-trucks, almost every space was occupied. I slowly drove through the rows searching for an opening. Eventually I found one, the very last available space in the entire lot. A dark gray sedan occupied the space beside it. I backed in, shut off my truck, and took a moment to relax. The sedan didn't seem unusual. In fact, it looked completely ordinary. 4-door, tinted windows, out-of-state plates, nothing remarkable. Still, something about it stood out. The windows were fogged over, completely. Every single window. At first, I assumed someone was sleeping inside. That happens all the time at rest stops. People pull over for a few hours and continue the trip. Nothing strange about that. I reclined my seat, set an alarm, and eventually fell asleep. The knocking woke me up. At first I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard it again. 3 sharp knocks against my driver's side window. I opened my eyes. A man stood outside. He appeared to be in his 50s, heavy jacket, baseball cap, flashlight in one hand. I rolled the window down slightly. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "Have you seen the owner of that car?" He pointed toward the gray sedan. I glanced over. "No?" The man looked disappointed. "You sure?" I nodded. "I've been asleep." He stared at the sedan for several seconds, then quietly thanked me and walked away. I checked the clock. 3:18 a.m. The entire interaction lasted less than 30 seconds. Still half asleep, I locked the doors and went back to bed. The next morning, the sedan remained exactly where it had been. Same position, same fogged windows, same everything. That struck me as odd. Most people don't spend an entire night at a rest stop, especially not after sunrise. I stretched, grabbed breakfast from the vending machine, and got back on the road. By lunchtime, I'd forgotten all about it. Until the following week. I was traveling through the same area again, and there it was, the gray sedan. Same rest stop, same parking space, same position. I actually laughed. The odds seemed impossible. This time I paid closer attention. The vehicle looked untouched. No obvious movement, no lights, no visible occupants, nothing. As I walked toward the building, I noticed a state trooper speaking with a maintenance worker. Both men kept glancing toward the sedan. For some reason, that made me uncomfortable. When I returned 15 minutes later, the trooper was gone. The sedan remained. I left. 2 weeks passed before I returned again. This time, the parking lot was nearly empty. Only a handful of vehicles occupied the entire rest area. And once again, the gray sedan sat in the same space. At that point, curiosity completely took over. I entered the building and approached a maintenance worker cleaning near the entrance. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded. "How long has that gray sedan been parked out there?" The man immediately knew which vehicle I meant. His expression changed, not dramatically, just enough to make me notice. Then he shrugged. "Longer than it should be." That wasn't reassuring. I asked if anyone knew who owned it. He shook his head. "Police are handling it." That answer bothered me. Not because it sounded suspicious, because it sounded serious. I spent the rest of the drive thinking about it. A few days later, curiosity finally got the better of me. I searched online. Eventually, I found a local news article. The article mentioned an ongoing investigation involving a vehicle discovered at a highway rest area. No details, no names, no explanation. Just enough information to confirm it was the same sedan. Then I found another article, and another. The deeper I looked, the stranger the story became. According to reports, the vehicle had first been noticed nearly 3 weeks before authorities became involved. Employees assumed the owner would return. Then days passed, then weeks. Eventually somebody reported it. Police searched the vehicle. What they discovered was never released publicly. The investigation remained active for months. No arrests, no public statements, no updates, nothing. The rest stop eventually replaced the parking lot section where the sedan had been sitting. The vehicle disappeared. The story faded away. People moved on. I probably would have moved on too, except for something that happened nearly a year later. I stopped at a completely different rest area. Different highway, different state, different trip. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed a familiar-looking sedan parked beneath the light. Dark gray, tinted windows, out-of-state plates. Same model, maybe even the same vehicle. I honestly can't say for certain, but what I do know is this. The windows were completely fogged over, every single one. And for the first time in my life, I turned around and left the rest stop without getting out of my truck, because some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some parking spaces are occupied for reasons you don't want to understand.